This is an inspiring story of resilience and fight. A story about a group of people who never gave up, fleeing persecution and bondage in their pursuit of a universal right we all strive for: freedom. This is the story of the Black Seminoles. Have you heard of the Black Seminoles? Thank you. Their courage under oppression reminds us that freedom is worth defending and cherishing every day. Yet very few have heard of the Black Seminoles or of their struggles. By telling their story, we aim to spark empathy, raise awareness, and inspire action to support human rights for all. Excuse me, have you heard of the Black Seminoles? Thank you. Have you heard of the Black Seminoles?
No, I haven't.
Thank you. The Gullah are a resilient African-American coastal community that played a crucial role in the Gullah Wars with their courage, maritime skills, and tight-knit solidarity. Have you heard of the Black Seminoles?
I have not.
Thank you. If it wasn't for the coastal Carolina African Gullah community, there wouldn't be any Black Seminoles. The Gullah are a resilient African-American coastal community that played a crucial role in the Gullah Wars with their courage, maritime skills, and their tight-knit solidarity. Have you heard of the Black Seminoles?
No.
Thank you. Their heritage, language, and resourcefulness help secure key supply routes, gather intelligence, and support those fighting for freedom and autonomy. The Gullah sparked a new dawn for the enslaved and liberty itself. This is the Gullah Wars. Have you heard of the Black Seminoles?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Forward! Burn it all down! We take our freedom tonight!
The first significant clash, often considered a part of the Gullah Wars, is the Stono Rebellion of 1739 in South Carolina. This rebellion was one of the largest slave uprisings in the British colonies, with approximately 60 to 100 enslaved Africans rising up against their oppressors.
Keep pushing, they're retreating!
Faster! I said faster! Harvest that cotton now, or there'll be hell to pay!
The Stono Rebellion was inspired by a combination of factors, including harsh treatment, restrictive laws, and the proximity of Spanish Florida, which had offered freedom to escaped slaves. How did the Gullah slaves come to be? In the early 1700s, the Kingdom of Congo had been undergoing civil wars, leading to more people being captured and sold into slavery, including trained soldiers. Now, slaves didn't come with a resume, so they didn't really know who they were bringing into the country. And in this particular case, a South Carolina plantation owner brought what looked to be big and strong, able-bodied men. Little did he know, he had a pissed-off ex-military fighter by the name of Jemmy, along with Jemmy's platoon. You guessed it, he got Black Rambo. And the fact that Jemmy and his comrades communicated in Portuguese, the language of trade, as well as one of the languages of the educated people, it was more likely that Jemmy held a high rank within the military. Now here's how it all went down. In early September 1739, dozens of enslaved men residing near the Stono River launched a violent campaign to gain their freedom. If you follow US Highway 17 around 12 miles west of Charleston towards the town of Ravenel, you'll pass a state historical marker commemorating the Stono Rebellion on the right side of the road, just after crossing the bridge over Wallace Creek. Some might find it surprising to learn that most of what we know about the names of the victims and the geography of the Stono Rebellion comes from just one surviving source. A letter written in Charleston in October 1739 and published in London in March 1740 as an account of the Negro insurrection in South Carolina. From that landmark, The rebels followed the path of a public highway once known as the Pon Pon Road, as the rebels moved in a southwesterly direction along what we now call Highway 17.
On the 9th day of September last, being Sunday, which is the day the planters allow them to work for themselves, some Angola Negroes assembled to the number of 20, and one who was called Jemmy was their captain. They surprised a warehouse belonging to Mr. Hutchinson at a place called Stono. There they killed Mr. Robert Bathurst and Mr. Gibbs, plundered the house, and took a pretty many small arms and powder, which were there for sale. Next they plundered and burnt Mr. Godfrey's house and killed him, his daughter and son. Then they turned back and marched southward along Ponce, which is the road through Georgia to Augustin. They passed Mr. Wallace's tavern about daybreak and said they would not hurt him, for he was a good man and kind to his slaves. But they broke open and plundered Mr. Lemmy's house and killed him, his wife and child. They marched on towards Mr. Rose's, resolving to kill him, but he was saved by a Negro, who, having hid him, went out and pacified the others. Several Negroes joined them. They, calling out liberty, marched on with colours displayed, and 2 drums beating, pursuing all the white people they met with, and killing man, woman and child when they could come up to them. Colonel Bull, Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina, who was then riding along the road, discovered them, was pursued, and with much difficulty escaped, and razed the country. They burnt Colonel Hext's house and killed his overseer and his wife. They then burnt Mr. Spray's house, then Mr. Sacheverell's, and then Mr. Nash's house, all lying upon the Ponce Road, and killed all the white people they found in them. Mr. Bullock got off, but they burnt his house. By this time, many of them were drunk with the rum they had taken in the houses. They increased every minute by new Negroes coming to them, so that they were above 60, some say 100, on which they halted in a field and set to dancing, singing and beating drums to draw more Negroes to them, thinking they were now victorious over the whole province, having marched 10 miles, and burnt all before them without opposition. But the militia being raised, the planters with great briskness pursued them, and when they came up, dismounting, charged them on foot. The Negroes were soon routed, though they behaved boldly. Several being killed on the spot, many ran back to their plantations, thinking they had not been missed, but they were there, taken and shot. Such as were taken in the field also were, after being examined, shot on the spot.
Though the rebellion was ultimately suppressed, this marked the beginning of a long struggle for freedom and foreshadowed future uprising in the decades that followed the Stono Rebellion. Tensions continued to simmer along the southeastern coast, especially as Florida came under Spanish control. Spain offered freedom to runaway slaves if they took up arms to defend the colony and to convert to Catholicism. This offer attracted many Gullah people, along with other escaped slaves, to make the perilous journey southward to Florida and to form alliances with the native Seminole tribes and other indigenous groups.
Keep moving, don't look back.
We almost there.
Long before Harriet Tubman, a swamp and sea-swept exodus carved Florida's saltwater railroad toward Fort Mose and the Bahamas.
In here. Are we safe?
From Cape Florida to Miami Keys, enslaved people trusted the sea's memory over oppression, weaving courage into a living current of freedom. They say history is written by the victors, but some histories are written in courage, risk, and the raw fire of freedom. This is the story of Fort Mose, the first black town in what would become the United States, and the perilous road to liberty that ran southwards towards Florida.
Don't stop, no.
Over 300 years ago, courageous Africans escaped the enslavement within the British colonies. They fled southwards on foot towards Spanish St. Augustine, crossing dangerous swamps and tropical forests. Yamasee natives assisted them on their perilous journey, thus creating the first Underground Railroad. The first freedom seekers arrived in St. Augustine in 1687 and were granted asylum by the city's colonial Spanish government. This group included 8 men, 2 women, and a 3-year-old nursing child.
In the fight for tomorrow, our voices ring clear. For freedom and justice, we'll conquer our fear.
In 1738, the Spanish governor of Florida chartered a settlement of Garcia Real de Santa Teresa de Mose. It's a mouthful, I know, or Fort Mose for short, as a settlement for those fleeing slavery from the English colonies in the Carolinas.
It is good to be home in Mose.
Now, Spain's promise of freedom to runaway slaves was a strategic maneuver to destabilize the British colonies and to create a buffer of African allies who would defend Spanish holdings from encroachment by the British. This offer attracted many Gullah people, along with other escaped slaves, to make the perilous journey southwards to Florida and to form alliances with native Seminole tribes and other indigenous groups.
Look how fast the children run.
They grow strong together. The future of our alliance is bright.
Over the next 25 years, Fort Mose and Spanish St. Augustine became a sanctuary for Africans seeking liberty from the tyranny of English slavery. It is estimated that 100 Africans made Fort Mose their new home. Mose men also contributed critical skills related to construction, hunting, fishing, and trade. The courageous women of Mose sustained and managed the community life through essential skills of food cultivation and preparation, childbearing, weaving and sewing, healthcare, and domestic duties. Some Mose women worked in town. Others pursued entrepreneurial ventures such as sale of baked goods and crafts. In 1740, British troops attacked Fort Mose. The conflict known as the Battle of Bloody Mose was won by the Allied Black, Spanish, and Native forces. However, the fortress and community buildings were destroyed, and members of the Free Fort Mose community moved to the town center in St. Augustine.
Okay, I wanted to start by telling you something that I thought about earlier. You were talking about Stono. Well, Stono is the reason that the first fort got destroyed, because after Stono happened, they got really mad, the British, because they were losing so many slaves down here. This was costing them money. So Oglethorpe decided, General George Oglethorpe, let me put that in, he decided he was going to come down here and he was just going to put the kibosh on that. But we had spies up there. They came down. They did the same thing Paul Revere did. They said the British are coming. So the blacks got up. They sent all the women and children down to the Castillo along with the citizens of St. Augustine. And they stayed here. This was their northern first line of defense. They held them off for a couple days. This gave the Indians and the Spanish and everybody a chance to get into the fort and come back. Then these guys retreated to the Castillo. Oglethorpe came in, completely trashed the fort. They were just waiting to gather their forces, get their strength, their second wind. Then they were going to attack the Castillo. But the Castillo attacked them first. That was called the Bloody Battle of Mose, because we shed so much of their blood that the fort was no longer habitable and they had to demolish it. And that was because of Stono.
And as the Spanish flag gets risen back over Fort Mose, victory for the Spanish and African militia and the Yamasee Indians. They took his shoes too.
We ready? Hey, I'm Jim Sawgrass. I'm here at the Battle of Fort Mose. I'm about to do a presentation on the native history here in this area. Original tribes here, such as the Timucua and Appalachee, had long died away pretty much from sicknesses, disease, slavery, of course. When the English came down in the early 1700s and raided all the missions, the Spanish had lost their stronghold with their native allies. What was left of them got carried away into slavery by the English and their native allies to the north. So in the early 1700s, as ancient tribes died away, lots of tribes in the Carolinas and Georgia territories started moving and migrating south into the Florida territories. The Spanish, seeing these runaways, called them Cimarrones, just like they'd called the runaway slaves who joined them here at Fort Mose Maroons. This meant wild and runaway and free. And so these terms that they called these people eventually became Cimarron, or today, the way the natives say it in their way, Seminole or Seminole. And so that's how the word evolved over time. It's an old Spanish word for wild, but it's a native word also for wild because they used that same Spanish word, but they didn't pronounce it with the R like the Spanish did.
So there isn't a distinct tribe called the Seminoles as such. It's a collection of different tribes that came together to be called
exactly
the Wild Ones.
Exactly. And then over time, the people here at Fort Mose, after the battle and the fort had been burnt down to the ground and I think rebuilt again, when the English took over Florida after the French and Indian War, the slaves had to realize they were going to put back into slavery or find their homes elsewhere in the wilderness. And that's when they, of course, even before, they had been migrating and moving in with native peoples since the very beginning. And so this allowed them to have their own villages now. A lot of them were under main chiefs. As long as they helped the Seminoles, they were allowed to have their own villages. They became the interpreters because they could speak many languages, mostly by the Seminole War era. Towns like Abraham, he was the interpreter for many of the Seminoles later on in the Seminole Indian Wars.
We kicked their butts, and we shed so much of their blood that the combination of all their piggery and all the blood made it so that it was no longer habitable. They had to dismantle it.
That's why.
Yes.
In the years to come, the Fort Mose site was swallowed by marsh, and the important legacy of our country's first legally recognized black community was largely forgotten. Today, Fort Mose is recognized as a significant local, national, and international landmark. Viva Fort Mose! In 1693, King Charles II of Spain lit a fuse that sent shockwaves through colonial North America. He signed into law the Declaration of Slave Freedom, and with the stroke of his pen, he set the world on fire. Across the 1700s, hundreds of Gullah escaping bondage migrated south into Spanish Florida and formed alliances with the native Seminoles. The free Gullah of South Carolina, Georgia Low Country forged a resilient culture. They built sanctuaries, spoke Creole, and kept their West African traditions. They formed independent villages with thatched roof houses, planted crops, and developed a blended Afro-Indigenous community, and later became to be known as the Black Seminoles. Pilaklikaha, or Abrahamstown, was the ultimate haven for Black Seminoles in the 1800s Florida.
Founded by Abraham, a brilliant former slave who escaped Pensacola, this place wasn't just a regular camp. And under his leadership, Pilanklikaha, also meaning many ponds, turned into a massive, thriving farming community. Now picture around 100 people living completely free, growing rice, melons, and beans, and raising livestock. It was a beautiful, self-sustaining community right under the nose of a hostile nation. Today, a historical marker stands in Sumter County, Florida, making sure that this incredible story of resistance and freedom isn't forgotten. There was a slight glimmer of hope for the Black Seminoles when in 1807 a landmark law came into force across the British Empire. King George III gave royal assent to the Slave Trade Act, which officially banned the trading of enslaved people. The act took effect on May 1st, 1807, marking a crucial moment in the fight against the transatlantic slave trade. This created a natural alliance between the Black Seminoles and the British to join forces to fight the Americans. However, this act did not abolish slavery itself within the British colonies. The institution would not be abolished until 1834. This act targeted the mechanics of the trade. It declared trading of enslaved people in Africa, the West Indies, and the Americas as unlawful and imposed a heavy fine of £100 for ship owners, captains, or agents involved in the trade for each person transported. Overall, the 1807 Slave Trade Act represented a major initial victory in the long legal and moral campaign to enforce servitude in the British Empire, laying the groundwork for future abolition and inspiring movements around the world.
Detail, make ready! Take aim! Fire!
Colonial superpowers played musical chairs in the early 1800s that left the Black Seminoles vulnerable. The British signed the Treaty of Ghent in 1814, ending the 1812 war with the Americans. This placed the Black Seminole community in a vulnerable position and left them exposed to American incursions.
Tucked away on the banks of the Apalachicola River, a place called Prospect Bluff hides a brutal history written in blood, fire, and a desperate fight for freedom. The story of Fort Gadsden, originally known as the Negro Fort, is a wild, haunting epic about a sanctuary built on hope and completely wiped out by a single catastrophic explosion. It all started back in 1814 during the War of 1812. And as a final appearance to the Americans, before leaving Florida in the spring of 1815, British forces built a solid, fully armed fort right on the river's edge. They didn't just leave behind stone walls and cannons. They handed the keys over to their allies, about 300 formerly enslaved people, and a handful of Seminole and Choctaw warriors. Once the British sails vanished over the horizon, this fort became a massive beacon of liberty. Hundreds and eventually over 1,000 escaped men, women, and children flocked to the area, building a thriving community and a free homeland in the wilderness. The fort's inhabitants didn't just sit around either. They defended their communities and even launched raids across the Georgia border. Runaways from as far as Tennessee and Mississippi tracked this place down like a North Star. To the enslaved people, it was a paradise. But to the American plantation owners, it was a nest of devils that absolutely had to be completely purged from the map. And by July 1816, the situation hit a boiling point. General Andrew Jackson, obsessed with expanding U.S. territory, ordered the fort's absolute destruction. U.S. gunboats crept up the river like predators, and nearly after a week of back and forth shelling, the unthinkable happened on July 27, 1816. the Americans fired a single hot shot, a glowing molten ball of iron that sliced through the skies and landed a direct hit on the fort's gunpowder magazine. The world literally exploded. A massive detonation instantly turned the stone sanctuary into a total slaughterhouse, vaporizing the dreams of the free black nation in a single heartbeat.
Get him out of here! Move! Please, no more killing. We surrender.
Around 270 men, women, and children were incinerated or crushed to death under the collapsing stone. The blast was so violent that it left the forest in a stunned silence, with shredded remnants of the inhabitants blown so high up in the air that bits of body parts and clothing clung to the needles of the highest pine trees, swaying like a tragic ornament against the sky. Only about 30 people survived the blast, and as soon as they were patched up, the US forced them right back into slavery. Things really started to go downhill for the Black Seminoles when the big European powers packed up and left them to fend for themselves. The Black Seminoles were dealt a further blow when the Spanish signed the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819, ratified 2 years later, and now for real, they were truly screwed and vulnerable and left to fend for themselves without any support from the British or the Spanish. First, the British abandoned them after the War of 1812 with the signing of the Treaty of Ghent, stripping away the freedoms and protections that had been promised by the British for fighting the Americans. And then came the ultimate knockout blow. The Adams-Onis Treaty, signed in 1819 and finalized in 1821 at the Department of State building right here behind me in Washington, D.C., with Spain officially handing the keys to Florida, and now the Black Seminoles have zero backup from the British or from the Spanish.
Fire! Burn it all! They're everywhere! Fall back!
By removing the Spanish and British protection, the treaty set off a chain reaction that led directly to the Treaty of Moultrie Creek, the Treaty of Payne's Landing, and eventually the tragic and violent conflict that tore Florida apart.
In 1818, General Andrew Jackson led the U.S. Army deep into Florida, determined to crush the Seminoles and reclaim every person of African descent who had fled into the swamps.
Push them back to the water!
Black Seminoles and their Seminole allies fought with desperate ingenuity, wielding guerrilla tactics honed in the forest and marshes they knew so well. They burnt plantations and ambushed American troops wherever and whenever they could. Though outgunned, they made Jackson's Florida campaign costly and stubborn. Jackson himself admitted the scope of the war was broader than a simple clash of sides. It was a battle against both natives and black freedom fighters. He characterized the struggle as an Indian and Negro war, recognizing that Black Seminole resistance lay at the very heart of the conflict. Amid the chaos, a black leader, a maroon commander named Nero, emerged to coordinate the scattered rebel forces after the fall of the Negro forts. Nero and his fighters pressed the fight against the U.S. columns, refusing to surrender, even as Jackson's troops overran Seminole towns. Despite the overwhelming numbers and resources, American forces found victory elusive for the moment. The Seminoles and their allies endured. Spain, unwilling to keep fighting the US, finally yielded. In 1821, Florida was ceded to American hands. Yet now the United States controlled Florida, and slave-holding settlers surged into the new territory, ravenous for land and determined to reassert control over black people. Enslaved men and women took their chances, fleeing to join the Seminoles throughout the 1820s, seeking the protection of the maroon communities. This influx of fugitives only sharpened the cries of Southern planters for action. American officials forced the Seminoles to sign the Treaty of Moultrie Creek in 1823, confining them to a reservation in Central Florida and ominously obligating them to apprehend and deliver any fugitive slaves to U.S. authorities. But of course, the Seminoles had no intention of betraying their black kin.
Back before the US government started forcing everyone out west, they tried to solve their problems in Florida with a massive land shuffle called the Treaty of Moultrie Creek, signed on September 18, 1823. Now, on paper, it looked like a straightforward peace deal, meant to stop the constant frontier violence and land disputes. But the second you look beneath that surface, you see a messy mix of power trips, racial tension, and federal control over a group of people who just wanted to be left alone. In plain terms, the US drew a big box in the middle of Florida and told the Seminoles, this is your new reservation. They also carved out a few tiny patches for Western Florida bands. Now, the grand plan was to round everyone up onto neat government-defined plots of land so they would stop clashing with white settlers. It sounded super orderly. Boundaries were set, and the tribes were given a 20-year window to just get used to it. To sweeten the deal, the US government threw in a bunch of perks. They promised protection, farming tools, livestock, and a steady $5,000 a year. They even offered a little support team. They offered an agent, an interpreter, a blacksmith, and a schoolmaster. On the surface, it looked like a nice care package. But let's be real, this was federal oversight dressed up as charity. And by moving onto the reservation, the Seminoles' daily lives were now being watched, managed, and controlled to keep things stable for the state. Of course, the US didn't give away these goodies for nothing. In exchange, the Seminoles had to give up all other land claims in Florida, let the government build roads right through their new territory, and help catch and return runaway slaves. It was a massive victory for plantation economy and settlement travel, but it pinned the Seminoles into a serious corner. At the end of the day, Moultrie Creek wasn't just a dusty old piece of paper. It was a snapshot of a moment when the United States tried to manage indigenous sovereignty through cash payouts and constant supervision, leaving both Native and Black Seminole communities to deal with the fallout.
Tensions simmered. U.S. slave catchers closed in around Seminole communities, and some black Seminoles moved with their people to more remote corners to escape the looming conflict. The fragile peace could not last. The drumbeat of impending confrontation grew louder, signaling a future born of resistance, courage, and the underlying will to stay free.
When Andrew Jackson became president in 1828, he immediately set his sights on pushing Native Americans off their land. And just 2 years later, he signed the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Now, this law gave the government the green light to swap eastern tribal lands for territory west of the Mississippi River, completely upending the lives of thousands of people. Now, down in Florida, The Seminole Nation wasn't about to give up their homeland and their independence. But to force the issue, U.S. officials and Seminole leaders met up on May 9, 1832, right here at Payne's Landing along the Ocklawaha River. Now, since Chief Osceola had been captured, a prominent Black Seminole interpreter named Abraham stepped into the massive leadership role, acting as the main interpreter to translate all of the complicated arguments and to bridge the communication gap. What came out of that meeting was the Treaty of Payne's Landing, which was basically a conditional deal. The Seminoles agreed to send a scouting group out west to check out the Creek Reservation. And if the scouts thought the land was decent, then the Seminoles would give up all of the Florida territory that had been promised in an earlier treaty and pack up and move within 3 years. As a part of the deal, the U.S. would take the Seminoles' cattle and pay for their move. Crucially, the treaty included a safety rule for protecting Black Seminoles from being enslaved during the relocation, giving them de facto freedom. Now, things started to fall apart almost immediately. Seminole leaders dragged their feet and didn't even bother going out to take a look at the land out west until October 1832. Then arguments broke out on whether the land was actually suitable, but the US government didn't care. They kept their 3-year moving clock ticking anyway, and by March 1835, things reached a boiling point because the Seminoles flat out refused to leave Florida. Jackson lost his patience and had his Indian agent Wiley Thompson deliver a harsh warning: move out or the US military will force you out. Black Seminoles and tribal members found themselves trapped in the government's aggressive relocation plans along routes that became a part of the tragic Trail of Tears. Now, instead of leaving quietly, the Seminoles stood their ground, sparking the long and bloody Second Seminole War. By 1835, Florida was a ticking time bomb. The government's stubborn push for Indian removal, white settlers greedily eyeing Seminole land, and plantation owners desperately trying to hunt down runaway slaves all collided in a massive mess. And on December 28, 1835, everything blew up.
If my phone rings, I will have to. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. My name is Kristen Wood. I'm the Park Service Specialist at Dade Battlefield Historic State Park. So here we are at the site of where 180 Seminoles ambushed 108 U.S. soldiers on December 28, 1835. It was roughly 8 in the morning, a kind of a cool, drizzly morning, and 108 soldiers that were led by Major Dade from Fort Brooke. They had left on the 23rd of December and were heading to Fort King to reinforce it. And they had crossed multiple river crossings, and basically Major Dade said, in a few days, men, we're going to be at Fort King and we're going to celebrate Christmas gaily. That's what he told them. And then bang, the ambush happened. And so Major Dade was marching, and he had pulled his scouts in, and he at that time was up front, and he was on his horse, and at the instigation of some of the other Seminoles, Chief Alligator and Chief Alligator and Jumper. Micanopy did the first shot and shot Major Dade.
Hidden in deep palmetto thickets and swampy terrain, the Seminoles unleashed a brutal, precise ambush. Caught completely off guard in a landscape built for guerrilla warfare, the U.S. troops were isolated and overwhelmed within hours. Almost the entire column was wiped out on the spot. This crushing blow is known as the Dade Massacre, and it sent a massive shockwave through American politics and military planning.
So at that time, they kind of, like roughly a third or so of the soldiers died at the initial volley from the Seminoles. And then they retreated down here, and they got their axes, and as I said, this is mostly pine lands, and they cut down and made a breastworks or a redoubt, and they pulled the wounded and the injured behind this. There were still some that were not even wounded or injured. Everybody came in here at kind of their last stand against the Seminoles. The Seminoles had kind of pulled back and probably would have left the area totally, but when they saw them putting themselves in a box, so to speak, a captive, you know, they basically came and finished them off. Ransom Clark was one of the survivors, and he played dead. So when they came, and he had, we understand, he had 5 wounds already. So he looked like he was dying already, or dead already. And another person, Edward DeCourcy, was also underneath all these piles of bodies, and they survived, and they were able to leave and go back towards Fort Brooke. They figured it was safer to go back to Fort Brooke than to go towards Fort King, where they might run into more Seminoles. So they went back to the safety that they knew. And unfortunately, they kind of separated in a Seminole, and the Seminole took out DeCourcy, and Ransom Clark was able to get back to Fort Brooke. A few days later, he had 5 wounds. He must have been crawled, and I mean, it must have been an amazing journey for him to do that. Kind of like a Survivor TV series, truly a survivor. Another guy known to survive was Joseph Sprague, and we hear that he might have hid in a pond, which is the opening over there where the sun is shining. There is a pond, and the pond at that time, the waterways have changed some. It would have been encroaching in this area. You would have seen it much more close. We heard that he hid in the pond, and then he also went back separately to Fort Brooke. He was illiterate soldier, so we don't hear as much about his story. Ransom Clark went on speaking tours for like 5 years before he finally died of his injuries. But he was literate, so he probably glorified the battle a little bit, or his part in it, but we have some of that information. He actually wrote a little booklet that he wrote telling his story to those who wanted to hear it. Probably didn't have much money, so that was a way to make a little bit of extra money.
But chaos didn't stop there. Around the same time, bands of Seminole and Black Seminole fighters started raiding plantations across eastern Florida, burning settlements to the ground. And as for the enslaved people on these plantations, this was the ultimate breakout moment. Hundreds of them risked everything to flee their masters, racing straight into the Seminole strongholds in the interior. And by early 1836, nearly 400 African Americans had joined the rebellion, turning it into the largest slave revolt in U.S. history. This double whammy of a militia ambush and a massive plantation uprising shattered any illusions that the U.S. could pull off a quick and easy land grab. Instead, it kicked off the Second Seminole War, an incredibly brutal guerrilla conflict that dragged on for 7 relentless years. Assuming a connection to the Dade Massacre in 1835, the United States Army soldiers under the command of Brigadier General Abraham Eustis burned Pelaskakaha to the ground on March 30th, 1836, during the second escalation of the Seminole War. It is thought that the U.S. troops marched straight into town in direct retaliation for the Dade Massacre. Now, the residents, fully knowing that all hell's fire was going to break loose on them, had already fled weeks earlier. But the army burned the entire prosperous farming community to the ground anyway. During the conflict, many native Seminoles and some Black Seminoles, including Abraham, were forced to relocate to Indian territories in present-day Oklahoma as a part of the Trail of Tears. Abraham died in the Indian Territory sometime after 1870.
The Second Seminole War between 1835 and 1842 raged as a monumental guerrilla conflict that stretched across 7 brutal years. From the U.S. perspective, it was branded an Indian insurgency. For Black freedom fighters, it was a war of liberation.
In the shadow, our spirits rise. Men and women, we lift our eyes. Together we stand.
General Thomas Jessup himself noted that Black Seminoles were the driving force behind the resistance. These fighters had everything to lose. Capture or surrender meant slavery or death. So they fought with unmatched ferocity, turning Florida swamps and Everglades into a deadly theater of guerrilla warfare that confounded the U.S. Army. The U.S. troops, backed by militia from southern states, poured into Florida to crush the rebellion. The enemy seemed to vanish into marshes at will, only to reappear as a sudden savage strike.
We strike here, then disappear back into the swamp.
Black Seminoles and their Seminole kin carried out hit-and-run attacks, melting into palmetto thickets, striking forts, supply lines, and plantations, then disappearing. Women and children in maroon communities stayed hidden, moving constantly to avoid surprise raids. The U.S. forces, battered by heavy losses and diseases in the harsh terrain, grew willing to bend rules. They resorted to treachery, capturing leaders under false flag truces. Osceola, the famed Seminole leader, was seized this way in 1837, a blow that weakened the Seminole side, yet it did not end the fight.
Keep your eyes peeled, the hostiles are restless today. Hold the line here no longer. Pull back through the swamp. Rendezvous point Charlie. Move fast. Understood.
Sitting at the mouth of Tampa Bay, Egmont Key looks like a beautiful postcard-perfect island. It's a super popular spot for boaters, swimmers, and wildlife. But if you look past the sunny beaches, you will find one of the darkest and the most overlooked chapters in Florida's history. Back in the 1850s, the U.S. Army turned this tropical paradise into an isolated concentration camp for captured Seminole men, women, and children. The prisoners trapped here called it the Dark Place, and it served as a brutal finding holding cell for those that were forced onto ships and deported out west. This nightmare unfolded during the Third Seminole War between 1855 and 1856. The U.S. government wanted to completely clear out any remaining indigenous people from Florida and send them to Indian territories out west in Oklahoma.
All right, move up the gangway. Hurry it up, we haven't got all day.
The Third Seminole War of 1855 to 1858, or the Billy Bowlegs War, was the final conflict between the United States and the Seminoles in Florida. It began when the United States Army Scouts deliberately destroyed the banana plantations of Chief Halata Miko, also known as Billy Bowlegs, only to provoke a reaction and to force tribal relocation. Chief Bowlegs launched a retaliatory ambush near Fort Myers, and this war was characterized by low-intensity guerrilla skirmishes, raids, and U.S. search and destroy tactics aimed at destroying Seminole crops to starve them out. By May 1858, facing starvation, Chief Bowlegs accepted a cash compensation and relocated to Oklahoma with about 165 of his followers. However, the U.S. failed to remove everyone, and a small, resilient faction led by Chief Sam Jones refused to surrender, retreating deep into the Everglades. They successfully evaded capture, becoming the ancestors of today's independent Seminole tribes in Florida. You know, the war never really ended. There isn't a peace treaty in place. This war is still ongoing. Now let's get back to ethnic cleansing.
In the broken treaty, truth was buried deep. Promises scattered where the
Land-based forts like Fort Myers were just too easy to break out of because the Seminoles knew the local swamps, they knew the way around, they knew it inside and out. But to stop them from slipping away, the Army established a prison camp on Egmont Key in 1857, officially calling it the Indian Depot. Surrounded by deep, rough, shark-infested waters, the island made escape practically impossible, and inside the camp was all about survival. The Army locked away hundreds of Seminoles inside cramped wooden stockades where they had to face the worst of the Florida elements. They dealt with blistering heat, fierce tropical storms, terrible floods, and rampant disease. Tribal oral histories and military records show that many of the captives never made it off the island alive. And several people, including important tribal leaders like Chief Tommy, died in the horrific conditions. Even though things seemed hopeless, the history of Egmont Key is also defined by incredible bravery and defiance. The most famous story involves a Seminole woman named Polly Parker. After being captured and held on the island, the military packed her onto steamships called the Gray Cloud. The ship was headed for New Orleans to start the long, grueling Trail of Tears march to Oklahoma. But the boat stopped for fuel at Fort St. Mark in the Florida Panhandle. Polly saw an opening. She tricked the guards by asking them to gather medicinal herbs, but she slipped into the thick woods and escaped. She and a few others walked roughly 350 miles through dangerous territory and all the way back to her homeland near Lake Okeechobee. Today, many prominent leaders of the Seminole tribes of Florida can trace their family tree directly back to Polly and her historic escape. By 1855, the military shipped out the last big group of prisoners, including the famous leader, Billy Bowlegs. Today, Seminole tribes work hard to keep the history alive so people could never forget their ancestors and what they went through. Next time you see Egmont Key, remember, it is not just a pretty park, it is a sacred monument to Seminole survival and the unstoppable resilience.
We dropped by a meeting of the 5 civilized tribes and found most tribes have kicked the blacks out.
That was one of the things that the Creek people wanted to do, was to get it back to where that the Muskogee Creek Indians would have full control.
The chief says there were no major complaints, but when the Cherokees did the same thing, 92-year-old Roger Nero filed a lawsuit.
And they just rejected us.
Chief Wilma Mankiller says she sympathizes that it was not her decision, but
my job now is to uphold the Constitution.
In the federal lawsuit and appeal, the Cherokees won. But among the Seminoles, the historically close relations between black and red have not changed.
We have 12 Indian bands and the 2 freedmen bands.
Lawrence Cudjoe, head of the Bruner Band, says it's because Seminoles and their slaves fought together against the U.S. Army.
Our forefathers, they died together. And the help that the freedmen gave the Seminole, the Indians, was so, they made a blood treaty that they, as long as the water flows and the oak tree grows, that they would be a part of that nation. They were just that close.
So how many, you said you drove in from here to North Carolina?
Flew in from
Flew
North
in,
Carolina
okay.
to Oklahoma City.
Oh, okay.
And then rented a car, specifically to come here.
Oh, okay.
I saw the museum online, and I did my research, and just on the whim, I drove in yesterday.
Came here yesterday?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so you probably talked to Richard, the director.
Richard, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I said, all right, well, I'm going to come tomorrow at 10 o'clock to talk to you. And here you are. Who are you? Your name, your background, your history. How did the people from Florida end up in Oklahoma?
My name is Jake Tiger. I am from the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma. I'm an enrolled member. I also have lineage in the Red Lake Ojibwe Nation and the Second Fox Nation as well. My clan affiliation is the Bear Clan, and I am part of the Thomas Palmer Band here in the Seminole Nation.
Now, if you could just translate that for me, please. What did all of that mean?
Okay, so
The Seminole, like their 5 civilized tribe brethren, were victims of a calculated purge of Native Americans throughout the United States in the 19th century. Through coercion, deceit, and ultimately force, the United States government relocated southeastern tribes west of the Mississippi River.
in a historical term, we go by the term Maroon. We don't go by Black Seminole, because to be considered a Seminole, that goes back to what I said in the beginning. You have to have a clan, you have to have a ceremonial fire town. That goes back to that, right? It's kind of like today. And say if I want to go fight for Palestine, that wouldn't make me Palestinian. I would be an ally of the Palestinians, right? So the same exact concept that goes back to the 1830s, 1840s with our African American counterparts. They're allies of the Seminole people, but they're not Seminoles. That it kind of clears up a little bit. The removal, most of us for the Seminole people, it wasn't, in covered wagons and like how the Chickasaws and Cherokees had. Ours was mostly done by the waterways.
What do you mean?
So we were packed on decommissioned slave ships, these steamboats, keelboats, and we were sent through a lot of these ports. So like Pensacola Bay, Egmont Key in Tampa, the inlet of Jupiter at the lighthouse, those kind of places. Those were removal spots. And there's from when we were removed from Florida.
While many were forced on an arduous and ignoble marches to their new lands, the Seminole withdrew deep into the Florida Everglades and resisted relocation through 3 great Seminole Wars. Lasting over decades, these engagements were the longest, costliest, and the most bitter wars of removal fought by the United States government. Less than 3,000 Seminoles were removed to the Indian Territory, while 300 were left behind in the swamps of central Florida.
The impact that the Maroons had on the Seminole people and from the Seminole standpoint is a lot different than what you're going to see in these narratives that are coming from the Cherokee and Choctaw and Chickasaw, where they're doing chattel slavery, Southern antebellum slavery, whereas we didn't utilize that. Because like I said, we don't want to adopt European methods. We don't want to be Americans. We still want to be Muskogean people. We're taking these people and giving them their sense of freedom and safety within our own boundaries. And so I think that really dignifies that story and that relationship between the Seminole people and our African American counterparts.
Upon arrival in the Indian Territory, however, self-determination would be denied them, as they were confined to the Creek Nation and its laws.
It was hard for them to grasp that concept because they don't see these Africans as human beings. They see them as people that need to go back to the fields in Georgia and Alabama.
Yeah. What's interesting is that the Seminoles didn't turn them in. They didn't say, you know what, this is not our fight.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have an issue with you. You got an issue with them, they're over there, leave us alone.
Mm-hmm.
And they fought back in support, in friendship, in unity, or even for self-preservation. Why do you think they fought back?
Oh, human rights violation is unjust across the board, no matter who it is. And so their fight is our fight. A lot of those freedmen or Maroons that came into our territories, like I said, they're going to pick up on stuff from us, and they're going to help us out, because if they help us out, it's going to benefit them also in the long run. So they were translators, they were interpreters.
Because they spoke English.
Yeah,
because of their time on the plantation.
Yeah, and we're still speaking Muskogee and Hijiti, Miccosukee language, and so it was a lot easier for us to teach them how to speak our language, and they already know English, so they can already go back and forth. It's a lot easier for them because they already have the concept of speaking the European tongue.
And only after a decade of struggle and political upheaval of the Civil Wars was the tribe able to form a sovereign Seminole nation in 1866, and Wewoka would be chosen as its capital. And what was the role in some of the Maroon negotiators and translators in making this happen? And also in the war itself, because some of the generals actually did comment to say, you know what, if it wasn't for these Maroons, we would have an easier time here, but these guys are putting up a heck of a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Or is that all fantasy?
I think it might be all fantasy. Like I said, that's. I think they're, like I said, they might be doing what the modern historians doing, is just gussing up the story.
Yeah,
it sounds good on pen and paper when you got to write a report back to DC.
So what really happened?
So what really happened is, the reason why the Seminole Wars lasted 41 years, and a lot of historians will say the first, second, third Seminole War. But coming from a tribal member, we see that as one continuous act of violence upon us. And so, we refer to it as a 41-year-long war. And so all these atrocities that have been placed upon us, we're not going to, we try to be diplomatic and try to use our words and try to be respectful. But when push comes to shove, now we got to pick up our ball clubs and our rifles, fight back. And our form of fighting was a lot different than what Europeans were utilizing. They're still using, what they call the gentleman's method of warfare. Is them lining up on a battlefield and it looks like a chessboard, essentially. We're guerrilla fighters. So all these guys are traveling on the road from Fort King to Fort Brooke. We're going to be in the tree line, ambushing on both sides. Like I said, try to sum up the Seminole War period. It was just one continuous strike of guerrilla warfare tactics.
Even after the formal end of the Seminole Wars, the struggle was far from over for the Black Seminoles. The exodus from Florida in the 1840s moved the Black Seminoles to Indian Territory.
This isn't just a group of warriors fighting the United States. It's the United States attacking the warriors, they're attacking the women, the elders, and the children as well. And so their method of wrangling us up and sending us out to Indian Territory would be essentially a human rights violation, a war crime, where they're capturing women and children and putting them in chains and shackles and sending them to Egmont Key or Pensacola Bay or the inlet of Jupiter. Because then, these troops would go capture, say like their mother, their wife, their children, and they would be notifying these warriors saying, if you don't surrender, we're going to execute your family on this day.
The U.S. government did not keep all of their promises. In fact, the U.S. Attorney General has shockingly ruled that the Black Seminoles' freedom was not legally recognized, effectively making them
as escaped slaves and subject to enslavement.
For the benefit of those who don't know about John Horse, could you just give us just a very brief introduction as to who John Horse is?
So John Horse was a runaway slave that came into Florida, into a Seminole town, especially built himself up during the Seminole War period. And he was really close allies with one of our Seminole War leaders, Kawakaji. And even when they came here to Indian Territory, even here in present-day Woke, where we're sitting at, he played a big role with Kawakaji as well, even going to Mexico with Kawakaji. So his story is really fascinating to see. After all this conflict of removal and warfare, and even they can still hold a close-knit community, even out here in the new lands of Indian Territory. And that's really interesting to see about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Push forward, no mercy! They're burning the cabins, we have to run!
You know, and John Horse's part, and a lot of the Maroons of that time period, there were even instances where even some Maroons were even kind of essentially telling troops where we were hiding at, because these troops were telling them, if you tell us where the Seminoles are, you'll be granted your own independence. And then they never even did that either. Even after the Maroons, told them where we were hiding at, they still would take the Maroons and send them out west. And so,
attacking! Run for your lives! Get back here! You cannot escape!
And so they were displaced, the Seminoles, and they got lumped in with the Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't like being with the Creek. Why?
That really goes back to independence, sovereignty.
What do you mean?
So what I mean by that is, and this was strategic on the United States. They knew what they were doing, and there was a group of Muskogees that were fighting against the Seminoles during the Seminole War period. I want to say there was about 700 scouts that were fighting against the Seminole people, and wrangling us up in the Southeast and bringing us out to Indian Territory.
This betrayal underscores a harsh reality, which was especially exasperated by the fact that the Seminole Indian transplants into the new territory were living under the jurisdiction of the Creek Indians, who had different cultural practices. One of the cultural differences was the practice of chattel slavery. Many of the Seminoles did not practice chattel slavery and lived in harmony with the free blacks. And so the free blacks and the Black Seminoles soon became targets of raid by other tribes and whites to capture and enslave as many black people as they could. In 1844, a black Seminole leader by the name of John Horse would travel from Oklahoma to Washington, D.C. to argue for a separate land grant for the Seminole Indians outside of the Creek territory.
We came to Indian Territory, and the United States told us, when you arrive to this new land of Indian Territory at Fort Gibson, you'll have your own lands. You'll be separate. You'll be sovereign from everybody else. You can govern as you please. Well, they didn't hold up their end of the deal. When we got there, they said, okay, now we want to put you guys under the jurisdiction of the Muskogee National Council. And for us, they said, well, no, we're not Muskogees. We're Seminole people. We wanted to be separate from everybody else. And we don't want to be governed by anyone. We want to govern ourselves.
Wishing to peacefully exist as far away from the Creek Nation as possible, John Horse and some 289 of his followers forged their path in the spring of 1849, leaving the place of exile to safer pastures.
And so they said, to hell with this, we're going to go somewhere to a place called Wewoka.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did they have Wewoka in mind ahead of time? Or
no, they wanted to get as far away as they could from the Muskogee National Council.
I see.
So they came down here in 1849 and settled on this place and call it Barking Waters, which in the Muskogean language is Wewoka.
Because there is water.
There's a little falls over here, and like the sound of rushing water, it sounds like it's barking water. So that's what they refer.
Is it true though?
John Horse and a group of Black Seminoles founded a settlement near modern-day Wewoka, Oklahoma, seeking safety and autonomy from the Creek Nation. They established a community at the falls of a small stream, lying in the fertile lands between North and South Canadian rivers. The steady rush of water over the falls gave the rise to Wewoka, meaning barking water in the Muskogee Seminole language. The safety of the Black Seminoles continued to be threatened by slave raiders, and so in the autumn of 1849, Horse and Seminole Chief Wildcat led approximately 100 blacks on a dangerous 1,000-mile trek across the Texas frontier and over the Rio Grande into Mexico to avoid the attempts of slavers and Texas Rangers to raid families and capture people of African descent.
Keep moving. We're almost there.
So how long were they in Wewoka for?
Not too long. You know, they settled here in 49 and left in 49 as well.
But they left some people behind.
Yeah, so they left some people here behind.
How many came out here from?
That I don't have the official number on how many went out there, because even some people even passed away on the travel from Wewoka to Mexico.
Oh, for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
For sure across
and then
Texas.
There was even conflicts, you know, and so
they were raided by the Apache and
so we have conflicts with the Apache, the Comanche, and the Kickapoos.
Yeah,
and we're just trying to seek refuge in Mexico. And so
were they invited by somebody in Mexico, or did they just say, you know what, we just need to get out of here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he saw that the Mexican government is going to be a lot more hospitable to him and his cause, because and this really goes back to, again, the prior development of the United States. The Southeast, we traded a lot. And so by us trading, we were going not just trading in the Southeast, we're trading up in the Great Lakes regions in Canada. We're even utilizing our canoes and traveling on waterways throughout the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, the Muskogees, the Seminoles, all those people. And they're trading in the Caribbean islands, they're trading in the Yucatan Peninsula, they're trading in Mexico. So we already have this pre-existing relationship with a lot of these Middle Americans. And so Kawakaji knows, if he arrives in Mexico, he's going to be treated like one of their own, because that goes back to these, thousands and thousands of years of trade.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the reason why Kawakaji had left the United States, Indian Territory, and settled in Mexico. Like I said, that goes back to that pre-existing relationship.
Yeah.
The caravan of the freedmen met up with Major John L. Sprague at the springs of Las Moras, close to the Mexican border. John L. Sprague is a noteworthy character in the Seminole Wars, well worth looking into. John Sprague and John Horse knew each other from their involvement in the Second Seminole War between 1835 and 1842 in Florida, where Sprague served as a U.S. Army officer and John Horse was a prominent leader of the Seminole, serving as a negotiator and an interpreter. During the Seminole Wars, Sprague, who was a captain at the time, was involved in the negotiations and surrender of Seminole leaders, including Chief Kawakaji, also known as Chief Wildcat, a close ally of John Horse.
recognizing each other, the three men, John Horse, Chief Coacachi, and Major Sprague, spent the night in the camp at Las Morris talking and drinking, and Major Sprague, it is said, provided the hooch. While they reminisced the night away, it was discovered that someone in their camp had alerted the Texas Rangers to their presence. Whether Sprague was complicit in the tip-off, it remains unknown. But it led to John Horse and his group to depart quickly across the Rio Grande to safety in Mexico. They crossed borders not as conquerors of circumstance, but as witnesses to endurance, drawing strength from a history that includes the Black Seminole exodus from Oklahoma, who carved freedom in the margins. The sound of neighbors learning languages, the rhythm of work and study, and the quiet dignity of a community building itself from shared hardship. Their past is our map, guiding us towards a future where safety is a right and belonging is earned through contribution. They carry stories of loss and resilience and a collective commitment to education for their children.
Fighting for freedom.
They made it. They made it. They made it. Finally. 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 A place to finally call home. They made it.
Fighting for freedom. Our hearts beat strong. In the land of refuge.
And no one fucked with them since. And no one fucked with them since. In the mid-19th century America, black people's freedom was never secure, even for those who shed blood to earn it. Facing the prospect of being thrown back into chains, the Black Seminole leader of John Horse and his close ally, the Seminole chief, Chief Coacachi, known as Wildcat, made a bold decision to hightail it down to Mexico. Mexico had abolished slavery decades earlier in 1829, and its officials welcomed these freedom seekers. The blacks made it across the river and connected with the Mexicans in the state of Coahuila. In exchange for their hospitality, John Horse and his band agreed to help the Mexicans fight off any raids from Texas. The Mexican government offered Chief Coacachi, also known as Chief Wildcat here locally, and John Horse and others land in Mexico if they could rid the land of the Comanche and the Apache renegades who were terrorizing the Mexican citizens. And in the arid northern Mexican frontier, in exchange for defending the Mexican border, the Black Seminoles, known as the Mescogos, received land and citizenship, and settling in Nacimiento de los Negros in Coahuila. They maintained their unique traditions, including a blend of African, Seminole, and Mexican culture, such as celebrating Juneteenth. The people built a new maroon community here at a place called Nacimiento. And just as they had done in Florida, they settled and lived and coexisted with the rest of the people here. They finally made it. This really is the land of the free and the home of the brave. This is what freedom looks like. Breakfast at Gertrude's started with a simple question to the hotel clerk. Where to eat? Gertrude's, she whispered with a knowing smile. Walking there felt like crossing into a memory you didn't know you carried. Gertrude's isn't just a restaurant, it's a living chronicle braided into every wall by a Muskogo woman who stirs courage into every part. Laura, the owner and Gertrude's living echo, shared memories of her grandmother and John Horse's convoy to Nacimiento. Her gravity drew us into a hushed reverence as she spoke history, worn like a shawl.
So how did you end up, like how did the Seminoles, all the way from Florida, fighting wars, going to Oklahoma, running away from Oklahoma, coming to Mexico, what did you learn? What were you told? What were you taught?
Bueno,
Tell me the story.
esa es la parte dolorosa.
That's the painful part of this history. That's what she's saying. Okay.
La parte dolorosa. La parte dolorosa es recordar los cantos tradicionales.
Okay, she's talking about the traditional songs. You know, remembering the traditional songs, bringing them is painful. It's painful. Through songs. Yeah, through songs.
Porque mi abuela contaba que sus papás le contaron que estos cantos los utilizaron para comunicarse para poderse escapar.
Yeah, she's saying that her grandma used to tell her that their parents, her grandma's parents, used to tell her that these songs that they used to use, it was a communication method so they can help each other to escape. You know, they used to communicate themselves through songs. You know, so those songs is not only like a celebration or just words. You know, it's a mean of communication between them to assist or to help each other during the escape route. More than just storytelling. Ya, porque las canciones no eran tanto como contar historias, era más para comunicarse mientras...
Esa parte a veces a mí no me gusta platicarla porque no lo viví.
She said she don't like to talk about that much.
Pero sigue doliendo imaginarme a mis antepasados.
Oh shit, she gave me the goosebumps.
Haberme imaginado a mis antepasados todo lo que tuvieron que pasar.
She's saying that she doesn't like to talk that much about the songs and all that because it's the painful part, you know. Like, and she's like, I wasn't even there. I'm not there, but it still hurts. You know, because it makes me think about my family, my own blood, suffering all that, having to go through all that while escaping from Florida all the way to Oklahoma, because that was the destiny, right? And then having to go, and then she said, there's this very typical or special song that hurts a lot. And she started singing a portion of it. And she said, like, it's a song that talks about leaving mama, leaving papa, leaving her children, and then just picturing and thinking my family members, my blood, having to say goodbye to more family members, kids, having to bring with them different kids from different parents just to offer them freedom just because of the desire of freedom, right?
Feeling the weight of Laura's trauma as she spoke, and listening to the scars of hardship carried across generations, her story became mine for a heartbeat. And in that breath, empathy finds its strength.
Mi mamá todavía hablaba el idioma.
Yeah, she's saying she's especially emotional lately or these days because we're currently during Holy Week in Mexico, time that they used to use to get together, you know, and do some traditional stuff, get together, family time, talk about tradition, cook traditional food and all that, right? It's not happening anymore, right? Her mom recently passed away. Now we're in Holy Week again, and she's taking vacation. She said, like, I just took vacation just so I can spend some time with my kids, my great kids, because I don't want that to be lost, you know. I want the tradition to keep going. So I'm gonna teach them how to prepare this, how to do that, this chance and whatever. And I'm extremely emotional because during this time of the year is when we used to do that. And then I asked her, like, hey, is it because Holy Week? Will you guys wear Catholics? Or it's, and they're like, no religion. Like we brought no religion. We are just respectful of God things, you know. If it's God related, we are respectful. We are that. She's saying that they were even so strict with their fasting during Lent, you know, because Catholics do that they won't even speak or talk, you know, because they were so respectful of the, it's God related, right? They don't care about religion, but if it's God related, we'll respect it. Exactly.
Mis nietos ya saben, y ahorita voy a recoger dos aquí, los otros ya están en nacimiento. Para enseñarles a hacer un maíz quemado que comían ellas después del ayuno y cosas. Entonces, ¿por qué estoy sensible? Porque esta es la fecha donde estaban de recogimiento en casa. las fechas donde ellos cantaban algunas cosas especiales, donde platicaban algo especial, y lo siento, o sea,
Por ser Semana Santa, ¿verdad? No, pero porque es vacaciones, no porque tenga una fecha, una significancia para ustedes, o sí.
Sí.
Es nada más que es el tiempo que tienen para reunirse todos juntos.
No, es porque ellos guardaban un respeto especial por las celebraciones a Dios.
Ah, ok.
Entonces,
Católicas, siempre fuera.
no traían religión.
Pero respetaban las cosas de Dios.
Respetaban las cosas de Dios y guardaban sus ayunos con mucho respeto, tanto respeto que ni siquiera hablaban, ni siquiera salían de la casa.
Ya veo. This is beautiful.
When voices thread through pain, I lean in. With the Black Seminoles, I hear the long echoes of hardship, bravery in bondage, persistence in resistance, and a shared ache that forges unspoken bonds. In listening, we stand taller together.
Hi.
She's saying that no religion, but whenever they establish here, they build their own, like, not community, like a house, like she said, casa de arena, sound house, you know, like they just build a small construction where they will gather to pray God. But the way they do it, it was mostly by sharing their dreams. So everybody get together and they share, compartían sus sueños, dice, ¿verdad? And then chants and food, they will also share food. Like she's saying that they will even drink Mascogi, yo pienso que Mascogi, ¿verdad? Hablaban Mascogi en ese ritual, durante el ritual.
Sí, porque era el idioma que ellos hablaban. Ahora,
and she's saying that she still got to experiment that, like, till she was like 18 years old, and then it stopped happening because one night after one of those gatherings or celebrations, one guy got killed. You know, not on a discrimination crime, nothing. It was an internal problem between two Moscogos inside the community. They stopped it. Hay que ver, no fue por tolerancia, no fue discriminación.
No, fue entre mismos afro.
Okay.
Are there any heroes in your culture? Because I mean, where I come from, we've got Tarak bin Ziyad. We've got people that we look up to and that we tell stories about, and people that we have statues of.
Okay.
Is there anybody in the Moscogos culture like that?
Let me ask you. Me está preguntando si hay algún héroe en su comunidad, si hay alguien. Dice, por ejemplo, nosotros tenemos a fulanito, sutanito y les ponemos estatuas. ¿Hay algún héroe para ustedes, comunidad?
Sí, Juan Caballo.
Juan Caballo, John Horse.
Y Wildcat.
Wildcat, Gato Salvaje. So you ask about their heroes, right? Yes. She's saying that they definitely talk about John Horse, Juan Caballo, they call him in Spanish, and Gato Salvaje, Wildcat, right? So Gato Salvaje, as they know them as the leaders of the expedition that started in Oklahoma, and they were leading their people, running away from slavery from Oklahoma, go to Texas. Texas become a republic themselves, and they start getting slavery as well, so they have to keep moving, made it to Mexico.
In a century of moves and new beginnings, the Black Seminoles, known as the Moscogos in Mexico, finally found a lasting home, where roots deepen, traditions endure, and freedom remains unthreatened. A heritage forged through resilience, now thriving in peace. I've got a couple questions, and thank you so much for your time.
Dice que muchísimas gracias por tu tiempo.
I have a couple of questions.
Dice que tiene más preguntas.
He's got a question. My question is, so 20 years later, they got here in 1850.
Dice
in 1870, they went back to Texas.
Dice que
and some stayed here.
Dice que en 1850 ellos llegan aquí y 20 años después algunos de ellos se regresan a Texas y algunos se quedan.
What does this oral stories and the songs talk or tell about why they went back?
Pregunta si la gente aquí sabe todavía la fecha sobre esa historia y qué es lo que cuenta la tradición oral y las canciones y todo eso de cuando se regresaron. Dices, oye, son libres aquí, tenemos a nuestros amigos los Kikapús, tenemos aguas, los mexicanos nos quieren, tenemos comunidad. ¿Por qué un grupo de ellos se regresaría? At some point, they abolished slavery, you know, in the U.S. And the U.S. come and it's like, hey, guys, why you don't come back?
The U.S. came here.
The U.S. came here, yeah, and they're like, hey, why you guys don't come back? We can offer you some, you know, retribution, some land, some, you know, in order to made up with what we did to you, right, guys? So the U.S. didn't say that, oh, we need you. We were like, oh, we want to compensate you, which is brilliant what she said after that. Because apparently the tribal lead back then, he was like, dude, don't do this. guys, don't do that. They were beating shit out of us 10 years ago. Why would we go, right? Don't do that.
The trouble leaders from here.
From here, yeah, from here. Her family, she said she remembers her great grandmother saying, like, we don't need that money. We don't need what they're offering us. That money is poison. It's cursed. It's cursed. Let's don't do it. So a lot of families decided to stay, right? A lot of them went back. And she was even questioned, or she has been questioned through the history, right? Like, why you didn't take it? You'd be in the U.S. right now. You'd be a U.S. citizen. You have, it's like, we don't need them. We don't need them. And I like, yeah, but look at the Kikapus. The Kikapus went back and they got back land and they got, yeah. But she's saying, yeah, but that's a different thing, because the Kikapus, that's their land. That's not our land. If I want to come back to fight for land, maybe Africa, but that's different. So if the Kikapus went back to their land, they have that's their land. It's yeah, exactly. Why would I go back just to get help from a country that was beating shit out of me 10 years ago? Man, makes no sense. I'd rather stay, which I think it was a wise decision, right? And I think they seem happy about it. They seem proud of their great grandparents making those decisions. Exactly.
Los derechos que las tribus Kikapú, porque es completamente diferente la migración. Los Kikapú regresaron a lo que era de ellos.
Los Kikapú sí regresaron, ¿va?
Ellos regresaron a lo que era de ellos.
Pero también se quedaron algunos Kikapús aquí, ¿no?
Ellos tienen las dos residencias.
Okay.
Ellos tienen acá viven.
Ya entiendo.
Entonces los Kikapú regresan a reclamar lo
pero
que es de ellos.
Era su tierra, exacto, era su tierra.
Era su lugar. Ellos fueron a reclamar lo suyo.
Sí.
Nosotros que íbamos a ir a reclamar.
Sí, exacto.
Entonces me decía alguien, ¿y no piensas tú ir a reclamar a Estados Unidos lo que te pertenece? Pues en ese caso me iría a África.
África, exacto. Uf. Déjame que traducir esto. Ok.
Just as the Muskogos were welcomed into Mexico, the descendants of the Black Seminoles opened their refuge to us. Their hospitality offered a gracious invitation to ask more questions, listen deeply, and learn with open hearts through a shared doorway to understanding, warmth, and lasting connection.
Gracias, señor.
All right, what are we up to, guys?
Cervecita, chévere.
What just happened?
Vamos a tomar cerveza. We're gonna take some beers with the guys of Negros Muskogos, the name of the community. The actual name of the community is Negros Muskogos. We're about to get some beer with some local people here. We're about to talk about their lives, learn about them. We'll see. It's about to get fun. I'm pretty sure we're having a good fun. They're very hospitable people. They're Mexican as well, so it's about to be a great energy.
Pues aquí esta gente llegó en 1856 a esta fecha. ¿Cuántos años hijos de la chingada ya tienen esta gente?
What did he say? Our people came here on 1856. And he says, how many fucking years have happened since then?
I wasn't sure if it was a truth serum or Santana having fun with three gringos when he dropped the bombshell. When the 89-year-old Muskogos man said, "Listen very carefully to me in clear English," it was time to huddle in and listen very carefully to him.
Listen very carefully to me.
Okay.
Aquí vinieron a dar unos por acá, por Veracruz.
So the first that started came from Veracruz.
You mean to tell me that this old man's family arrived in 1856 from Veracruz, that is 900 miles south of Negros Muskogos, and not Wewoka, Oklahoma, that is 700 miles in the opposite direction? Am I to take the word of an 89-year-old man who is enjoying drinking rum straight from the bottle and possibly having fun with us? Or could we be onto something?
Partying with the Muskogos, baby.
It turns out trade existed between Spanish West Florida and Veracruz, which hosted a significant African slave population with a high concentration of enslaved Africans working on sugar plantations, cattle ranches, and in port areas. And if we recall our conversation with Jake Tiger from the Seminole Nation in Oklahoma, the Seminoles certainly had trading partners in Mexico and Middle America.
We traded a lot. And so by us trading, we were going not just trading in the Southeast, we're trading up in the Great Lakes regions in Canada. We're even utilizing our canoes and traveling on waterways throughout the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, the Muskogees, the Seminoles, all those people. And they're trading in the Caribbean islands, they're trading in the Yucatan Peninsula, they're trading in Mexico. So we already have this pre-existing relationship.
They were not coming from Texas, Oklahoma. No venían de Texas, Oklahoma.
No venían de...
They weren't blacks?
De Florida.
Florida.
Oh, from Florida.
Hold
on a second. Is this sailing from Florida to Veracruz? You didn't go around. You didn't go Florida, Oklahoma, Texas down. You went from Florida to Veracruz across on a ship?
Se fueron derecho.
That's exactly what it happened, yeah.
The same as how the folks went to the Bahamas.
Sail
to the Bahamas. There is a group that went from Florida to Veracruz. So were they in the Trail of Tears? Ask him.
¿Estuvieron en el Camino de las Lágrimas? ¿Has escuchado hablar sobre el Camino de las Lágrimas?
Pues yo creo que todos esos hombres anduvieron. Eso dicen ellos, plática. Yo no anduve ni aquel.
Sí, claro.
Nosotros no.
He's saying that's what they say, that's what the oral tradition or the oral says.
But they came from Florida.
That's what the word says.
We are.
Black people come from Florida.
Is that so? Then were you black?
Your family was black when they came here?
Sí.
Wow.
Puro.
That's a new shipment route that we didn't consider.
Wow, I think you would say something.
Esas son historias de long time ago.
That's very old story.
And who told you?
Que podría decir que nadie me lo dijo. Ay, in the old kitchen over there, yo estaba 7, 8 años, a young guy, 7, 8 years old. When my grandmother, my grandfather, or whatever that kid is talking about.
Entonces, todo fue a través, nadie se lo contó, usted lo escuchó por casualidad cuando era niño. Oh yeah, so nobody told him about this story. He happened.
He just picks it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he remembers even when it was on that kitchen when I was 7 years old and I listened and I picked up that they came from Florida. Veracruz?
From Florida.
Veracruz, Florida, Veracruz. Florida.
This is truly remarkable. We have stumbled upon another source of a Muskogees population that is not descended from the Trail of Tears, but from a different slave legacy, about 900 miles south of Negros Muskogees. Certainly, more work needs to be done, and I'm still suspicious of an 89-year-old man's memory with a penchant for drinking rum straight from a bottle.
Hábleme un poco más de sus padres, ¿Dónde nacieron sus padres? ¿Usted sabe dónde nacieron sus padres?
Sí.
¿Dónde nació su papá y su mamá? Aquí en Muskogees, aquí en Coahuila, aquí en esta misma tierra, okay. Y murieron en Rockettville, Texas.
5 years after the end of the Civil War in the United States, in 1780, the U.S. Army came to town seeking help in the frontier wars from the Black Seminoles, who were renowned for being expert trackers and fierce fighters. Maroon men left their families behind for promise of land in the United States and restitution. Santana's father was one of those men, who was buried in Brackettville, Texas, near Fort Clark, never returned to his family or see his son again. The Muskogos in El Nacimiento have celebrated Juneteenth, known locally as Dia de los Negros, the Day of the Blacks, since the 1870s, to commemorate their ancestors' escape from U.S. slavery and their arrival in Mexico. While Juneteenth in the U.S. celebrates the abolition of slavery, the Muskogos celebrate it as the day their ancestors secured freedom in Mexico, a nation that had already abolished slavery. And our friend Santana plays a crucial role in Nacimento's annual Juneteenth celebration.
That part of the celebration of the Juneteenth is that the people dress exactly the same, because just the man goes to the city, gets out of the community to bring supplies, including the clothing.
Oh, you're the guy?
So he is one of the guys that goes to Muskis, and the way they identify them, it's... ¿Lo podría decir otra vez?
Sí.
¿Cómo lo identifican en Muskis?
Porque fíjate lo que te voy a decir. Listen very carefully. Yo voy a Muskis. Cualquiera que me ve en Muskis, anybody seen me in Muskis, I'm gonna say this guy is from Nazareno. Y de este no, ni de este tampoco.
Ustedes se reconocen entre ustedes. Beautiful.
Sí, beautiful.
All right.
Repeat that for my benefit.
For the benefit of those who don't speak Spanish?
Yeah. What did he say?
Yeah, he's saying that since he's one of the ones that go outside the city, everybody identifying themselves, and everybody can recognize each other, and they can easily know that they're Muskogos. You know, like
the sense of community.
It's incredible, man. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
After we traded stories and absorbed the chorus of the community, we said goodbye and moved on. Back to the car, there it stood, unyielding, staring us down, the mural. It pressed in with the gravity of history, tracing the Muskogos' jagged path from Africa to Florida and to Mexico. And there is an image of John Horse looming within its ledger, a quiet sentinel of the Oklahoma exodus. The mural wasn't just art. It was a verdict, a magnet pulling us towards truths we hadn't yet named. This discovery demanded more than curiosity. It demanded reckoning, a deeper gaze into the roots that carried a people across continents and time. As we said our goodbyes, I'm left with an overwhelming pride in meeting the descendants of Jemmy and the Stoner Rebellion, Fort Mose, and the courageous lineages of the Seminole Wars and the Trail of Tears. Their stories aren't distant echoes, but living testimonies, threads woven through time, resilient stitched into the fabric of now. I carry the weight of their stories, the memories of the struggles, and the renewed vow to honor their legacy by listening, learning, and bearing witness. So long as there is a breath in their bodies, they refuse to surrender, refuse erasure, and refuse to be silenced. They stand unyielding, defiant, and free, carrying the legacy of the Black Seminoles, fighters, navigators, healers, and ancestors who refuse to bow. Their courage lights the present, guiding us towards a future where every voice is honored and freedom is a shared inheritance. I walk away grateful for the courage to tell these stories, the lessons in history's ripple, and the enduring flame of dignity in those who refuse to be erased. May we listen more deeply, learn more bravely, and act more justly in their name.
In 1870, the U.S. Army invited the Maroons to return from Mexico. The Seminole freedmen returned hoping to reclaim their land rights set out in the original treaties at the time of the Indian removal and to serve as Army Scouts for the United States. The The Seminole freedmen in Texas, descendants of free black people and escaped slaves who allied with the Seminole Nation in Florida, served as elite U.S. Army Scouts from 1870 to 1914. Throughout the 1870s, more Maroons emigrated back to the United States from Mexico. And on July 4th, 1870, the first group of Black Seminoles arrived at Fort Duncan, Texas to offer their scouting services. 6 weeks later, in August, the U.S. Army created the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. The Black Seminole Scouts usually operated alongside units of the Buffalo Soldiers, the African American Cavalry Regiment, and sometimes they launched independent expeditions that struck fear into their foes. They engaged in 26 campaigns and were often heavily outnumbered, but the Scouts never lost a man killed or wounded in action. 4 of the Maroons received the Medal of Honor for their action. Private Adam Payne, Private Pompey Factor, Trumpeter Isaac Payne, and Sergeant John Ward. All 4 are buried in the Seminole Negro Indian Scout Cemetery, west of Fort Clark in Texas. Seminole Indian Scout Cemetery. This here is the burial site of heroic U.S. Army men, families, and their heirs. These Seminoles came all the way from Florida in around 1850 and lived in northern Mexico or Texas. They joined Lieutenant John L. Bullis and Colonel Ronald McKenzie in ridding Texas of hostile Indians in the 1870s. As the Plains Wars ended, the U.S. Army no longer needed the Seminole Indian Scouts. Many of them enlisted in the segregated Buffalo Soldier Regiment, and in 1914 the U.S. Army officially disbanded the Seminole Indian Scouts.
In the dance of the brave, we find
In 1914, the Army disbanded the unit, and many were forced off the military grounds without the land that was promised to them. The Black Seminoles were displaced from Fort Clark and moved to nearby Brackettville, Texas. Some of the Black Seminole Scouts' descendants remained in Brackettville, keeping their unique culture and heritage alive for future generations. The Scouts and their families settled in a community near Brackettville in Texas, far from the rice fields of the Carolinas and the swamps of the Florida, yet proudly retained their unique identity. Meanwhile, other branches of the diaspora persisted in Oklahoma. The Black Seminoles, known as the Seminole Freedmen, remain a part of the Seminole Nation, farming and living in their own communities. Across the restless Atlantic, a bold exodus began. The Black Seminoles, descendants of free blacks and escaped enslaved people fleeing the Florida wars in search of freedom, bridged the Gulf Stream to Andros Islands in the Bahamas, where British protection offered shelter and a chance to reshape their fate.
in the island.
In Red Bay's Bahamas, they crafted a new life, binding African, Muskogee, and island influences into a resilient living culture.
Fighting for freedom.
They turned peril into purpose, sea into sustenance, and memory into strength, guarding kingship, language, and ritual as they built a community on the edge of the unknown.
Rise up, rise strong, hear the call.
This is the story of the Black Seminoles who didn't want any part of any wars or to be ensnared in the Trail of Tears. This is the story of the Black Seminoles who sailed to the Bahamas instead.
In the heat of the War of 1812, promises dangled like bright beads. The British vowed aid and land and economic backing for the Seminoles' loyalty in New Orleans. Yet, those assurances dissolved into thin air, leaving the Seminoles to face the harsher truth. Amid rising tensions, two British figures, Alexander Arbuthnot and Robert Arbitzer, were seized as Seminole sympathizers by the Americans and swiftly executed. The moment crackled with consequence. The Seminole leadership, sensing danger on all sides, resolved to appeal directly to the British in the Bahamas. A single ambassador was chosen, Chief Kanaji. It was entrusted to speak for a people pressed between empires.
There lies our new home, the land of the Bahamas. Fulfilling our dreams there, my brothers.
With resolve, Kanaji and his small band cut their sails to the Gulf Stream in a traditional Seminole sail rig canoe, a vessel sturdy enough to bear up to 20 souls. They rode the current to New Providence, arriving on September 29, 1819, with their hearts filled with a mixture of hope and fear. An interpreter, one of their own, a Black Seminole by the name of Abraham, stood beside them, translating a message that burned in their throats, that the Americans were moving in to annihilate the tribe, and only a just response from the British could spare them. But the British were war-weary and were bound by a recent peace agreement with the United States, and so they refused to intervene. The decision felt like a cold wind over a fragile flame. The Primrose, a British schooner, appeared beside them, and Kanaji and his companions were ferried back to Florida with their canoe trailing in tow, a symbol of a voyage unfinished and a dream deferred.
Fulfilling our dream. Fulfilling our dream.
2 years slid by in quiet echoes, and a fresh band of Seminoles reached New Providence, hoping to carve out a lasting stay. Among them, a member proudly displayed his certificate of gallantry with good conduct, earned serving the British troops in Florida during the War of 1812. That wasn't good enough. Yet once again, the dream crumbled into reality, and they too returned to Florida with their aspirations pressed in the sails of another failed crossing.
We'll fight for our freedom. Fulfilling our dream.
The Black Seminoles of Florida yearned for true freedom, and their bold stroke came when they rowed dugout canoes across a perilous ocean, aiming for the Bahamas long before the Seminole Wars began. In 1821, a third band of Black Seminoles pressed onwards from Cape Florida, Key Biscayne, with their eyes towards a sharper dawn, their escape from Florida unfolding beneath a sky that shimmered with uncertain hope as the Second Seminole War raged on from 1835 to 1842. Now, rather than bending to ceded loyalties in Nassau, this group cast a lot with the windswept shores of Andros, where red bays would rise like a stubborn stronghold against the sea. In the early 1820s, along the quiet edge of Cape Florida, a story of courage began to unfold. The sea wore a patient blue, and beyond it waited a shore that the Black Seminoles believed could cradle a life free from pressure and peril. They moved not in a straight line of escape, but in a circle of negotiations, a careful dance of trust earned and refined through shared struggle. The Florida frontiers remembered conflicts and truces, and within those memories grew a plan to seek sanctuary where law might temper power with mercy. 2 delegations carried that plan across the Atlantic to the Bahamas, a distant archipelago where salt air might temper the yearnings of a people who have learned to survive without surrender. They spoke not with words, but with identity laid bare beyond a listening audience. The Bahamian water would witness their plea, a place where protection might overshadow persecution, where the daily light could bring a new dawn.
Yes, Red Bay is way down in the west there. When the sun set in the evening, it's so red like a blood. Everybody loves that. Tourists come and see it from all over the world. Red Bays. The sun, red like a blood going down in the sea. Yes, sir.
Stand tall with a heart full of courage, answering the call. The chains of oppression can never hold us down, for we rise as warriors, reclaiming our crown. Together united, we'll break every chain, fighting for freedom. We will stand our ground in the rhythm of resistance, a powerful sound, respect and equality. Our anthem we sing through the trials and struggles.
I knew that their roots were probably different. Reverend Dr. Bertram A. Newton. In the early 1820s, hundreds of Negro Seminoles left Cape Florida aboard a Bahamian wrecker called the Shearwater. They crossed the Gulf Stream and landed along the western shore of Andros from the Joliet Cape south and established a settlement at Red Bays in commemoration and tribute to the people of Red Bays, Andros.
As the news started to tighten around their lives, the Black Seminoles sought freedom across the sea in the Bahamas. The first group of 150 departed from Florida to Andros with their resolve unshaken by peril. A hush of fear and hope moved through the palms as the boat slipped away. On the turquoise horizon, a new chapter began. Desperation tempered by courage, and a pledge to endure, to survive, and to forge a future beyond oppression.
Trials and struggles, hope will take wing. Voices singing strong, echoing through the land.
Then in 1823 came a dramatic moment. 300 Black Seminoles escaped Cape Florida in a coordinated exodus. A flotilla of 27 sloops and canoes stitched a perilous passage across the Atlantic, a caravan of living resolve moving towards a new horizon.
We take a stand for respect and equality. We fight with pride in this battle.
The sea tested them, but they pressed on, driven by a stubborn faith that a sanctuary might still exist beyond the water's edge. In our modern era, this was no mere journey. It was a desperate maritime exodus, a harrowing flight for survival that mirrored the tragic waterlogged nightmares of the Cuban and Haitian boat people.
In this battle for freedom, we will not hide. Hand in hand.
Hundreds of souls clung on to the churning, unforgiving waves in a final frantic bid for life, their flimsy vessels barely defying the abyss. It was a perilous dance with death, where hope was as thin as the rotten wood beneath them.
Fighting for freedom, we will stand our ground in the rhythm of resistance.
Countless travelers, driven by oppression and poverty, face not just the terror of the deep, but starvation, dehydration, and the ruthless indifference of the sea. And under the merciless sun, their journey was a silence broken only by the screams of the dying and the relentless pounding of the swells. Many did not survive this.
Help us, please help. I can't breathe, dear God.
Through the trials and struggles, hope will take away.
No, he's gone.
The dreams swallowed by the dark, silent depths of the Florida Straits, a watery grave for thousands who sought only the shores of freedom. Red Bays on Andros Island emerged as a harbor of memory and a seedbed for beginnings anew, where the old world salt air met the rhythms of a life reimagined in exile.
That like Big Crosskey, Little Rock, and Little Crosskey. Look, I show you the point. Like they landing on Big Crosskey, like they would land there for like a day or two, and they come across on. That's stuff. Old Red Bay, that's right down there.
Today, more than 300 descendants keep the flame alive here in Red Bay. Their lives woven into a sparse tapestry of sponging and fishing and crabbing and wood carving and basketry. The baskets here from Red Bay, they carry a legend beyond their loom. They are said to be the finest anywhere in the world, drawing visitors from every corner of the globe who come to claim a harvest of artistry.
In the islands where the sun rises high, we stand together, we reach for the sky.
Beautiful.
Fighting for freedom, our spirits
And this is a real
rise.
cinema?
With a respect for each other, united remain. Rise up.
Miss Peggy, tell me more about your Red Bays basket and how long you've been doing it for, and what's it made of?
Okay, it made of silver palm. This is the beginning of it. I'll show you right now. And we put the silver palm on the line like for 2 weeks to dry. Then we prep it. This is the starting of the basket.
As the Reverend Bertram A. Newton notes, the remote settlement earns its small renown one exquisite weave at a time. The Red Bay baskets afford the remote settlements some relative notability, as they are said to be the best baskets made anywhere.
No, Peggy, this was a skill passed down to you
From my grandparents.
And where do they bring it from?
They brought it from they learned it from their fathers and their fathers and their mothers, and then they pass it down.
And where did their fathers and mothers, like, was it from here or was it from Florida? Or was
From
it
Florida.
From Florida.
Yeah.
So this was a Florida skill that was passed down through generations, and you, Miss Peggy, are now doing this as well.
Yes.
The traditional way.
Yes.
The Black Seminole way.
Yes.
Miss Peggy is an original Black Seminole. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There is a school of thought. If it isn't documented, it never happened. Yet oral traditions keep our ancestors' legacy alive, lest it fade like a forgotten memory. In a culture without writing, stories must endure. We met Otis, our historian, whose scraggledy voice guards history and keeps memory vivid.
I'm a fifth generation Seminole Indian. Fifth generation Seminole Indian descendant. It was dating back like Red Bay is the only settlement on the west side of Andros, and it was the oldest settlement in all of Andros. Dating back to around the year 1821, there were Seminole Indians mixed with black slaves from a place called British in South Florida, and they were trying to run away from slavery. There was approximately about 21 to 20 families
that made what they call dugout canoes. Put their seeds and stuff into their boat, and without sail or engine, paddle their way across out of American waters, across the Gulf Stream, and across 80 to 90 miles of the Bahama Bank, and landed here on the west side of Andros, a place further south from here called San Luis. When they came here, there was no one living here, so they were free. They were never slaves. They were free. So they were faced with survival. They needed shelter, and they used a palm tree like that palm over there, and they would make a frame and make what they call thatch camp.
Make what?
Thatch camps.
Thatch camps.
Camps. C-A-M-P-S. And there was no medicine, no doctor, no clinical, nothing. They knew which bush the plants around them to use. They would boil a tea, and they know how to use them for their medicine. Their seeds, well, they planted crops like corn, peas, cassava, sweet potato, peanuts, yam, sapodilly trees, and all the seeds that they brought, they planted.
Oh, they brought seeds with them from Florida?
Yes.
Interesting, really. They didn't just come like this empty-handed. They brought seeds with them.
And they're dugout canoes. And they were not in this part of the island. They were in the interior of the island. The Blue Creek, way down in the middle of the island, North Andros. And they will go in the bushes and plant. The bow legs, because the Seminole Indian chief, the Black Seminoles Indian chief, is always named as Billy Bowleg. So the Bowleg families and the McNeil families, some of them went around the east side of the island, and that's out like in Nicholstown and Massapine, and those are a part of the island, North Andros. You have the Bowlegs and the McNeils and different surnames that were originally Seminole Indians. They knew how to clean sponges. And there was no need for meat or anything like that, or water, because the island had a lot of fresh water.
Fresh water.
And the boys, the fishes, the turtles, the iguanas, and stuff like that was their meat. So they knew how to clean those and eat those. And this began making boats until about boat sailing, little vessels, wooden boats. And they began sponging until about the year 1929, which the hurricane came and it destroyed most the sponge that they used to get. It was called a velvet sponge. Velvet sponge, no one has ever seen it in this generation or know what it is.
Tell me more about how your ancestors came here.
Well,
were they a part of the original Black Seminoles or the Seminoles that came here from Florida?
They were some Black Seminoles mixed with. They were not my color. You're black. They were like your color. Really long hair. And they lived, that generation of people, the majority of them lived to be 70 years old, 100 years old.
The people that came over?
Yes. And the oldest one recorded lived 114 years old.
Here in Andros?
Yes.
That's a Seminole...
who came to the west side of Andros and Red Base.
From the Exodus?
Yes.
Is your family...
Wellington.
Is your family from that Exodus?
Wellington. They're the son... I'm a fifth generation Seminole Indian. Fifth generation Seminole Indian descendant. My uncle, who's 90 years old, he is like a fourth generation Seminole Indian. They never kill each other. That's probably another reason why they survived so long. There was no recorded incident that someone over Red Bay killed someone over Red Bay. Or those Indians, they never used to kill themselves. They shared everything they had with each other, and they worked together with each other. And they would probably fight today, but tomorrow they hugging with each other and saying, I love you. So there was no recorded incident.
And the people lived here off the land, and they just continued drinking their fresh water, sponging, eating.
Until 1965.
Until 1965?
Oh, yes.
What happened in 1965?
That's when I was born. and
that's when everything went downhill?
that's when Tommy Davis Jr. died, Mahalia Jackson died, Otis Redding died, Sam Cooke died.
In 1965?
All of those died during
I
that
didn't know that. That's interesting. And then you were born?
And when I was born in November, a hurricane came called Bessie Hurricane and destroyed most of the land. So the people who were living toward the north to rail base at the old rail base site, they had to move to this part of the island because it's the highest part of the land on the island and rail base on the west side of Banjo.
Is there much of a Black Seminole community here in this Red Bays area or Nicholstown areas, or have they now just mixed with everybody else intermarried and moved out?
The bloodlines dwindled down because
the bloodline
intermarriage, there's not the same surnames anymore.
Right.
You'll probably only know them by their last surnames.
Yeah.
But the bloodline in that Seminole is just gone.
Just gone?
Oh, yeah.
And what is your name, sir?
Otis.
Otis?
Yeah.
Otis.
Yeah.
Every single one.
Everybody that lives here are descendants of Seminoles.
Every single one. Everyone. That's the Cold Brook. That's the Bull Lake. From the Bull Lake, all of them are Seminoles that include here.
I think it's interesting how the name Bowleg is here in Andros too.
Yeah, Billy Bowleg. I could show you that's right through the road here. Right through the road here. That's the Bowleg. They do call right now Frederica Bowleg. That's my grandchild. The son that still do straw work. That's the carver right here, Wallace. You wanna when we pass back, you could see him and even take like Henry Wallace, you know?
Yeah.
Red Bays, North Andros glows with a lineage of traditional wood carving threaded through African and Black Seminole heritage.
What are you carving there? What are you making?
Turtle.
A turtle?
Yeah, oxtail turtle.
And what kind of wood do you use for the carving?
This is horse flesh. Horse flesh and mahogany.
Sculpting intricate marine life and wild creatures, awakening them into living, breathing craft, which sustains a culture's pulse and memory, carved in grain and time.
Hey, is that Otis?
Yeah, that's Otis.
The man, the myth, the legend? The man, the myth, the legend. Where are you off to?
Brought some bush to wash my hair.
All right.
I don't wash my hair with shampoo and stuff like that.
Oh, what do you wash your hair with?
I boil bushes along that I know and wash my hair.
With some bush stuff?
Plants.
With plants?
A lot of different plants. You have like what they call the obia bush.
Yeah.
Corn bush. You can wash your hair with that. You have like hibiscus plants. You can wash your hair with that. You have calamari tree bush. You can wash your hair with that. Long wine and many others.
You weren't kidding.
But not
you weren't kidding.
See, I was using the shampoo out of the shop, and I tried everything in the shop, and it was still breaking my hair.
Oh, was it?
But now that I start using the calamari and boiling using it, it don't break anymore.
Nice. Nice.
North Andros stands as the Bahamas' agricultural heart with the richest expanse of arable land. Farmers coax onions, tomatoes, peppers, and strawberries from the soil with precise fertigation. By 2026, $50 million in investments have unleashed aeroponic towers and solar power igniting food security and a bold, sustainable surge in local production, cutting imports and fueling a brighter horizon. History is our fuel. The Maroons didn't just flee, they shattered chains to claim total mental autonomy, proving that liberty begins in the mind. Across borders, from the Bahamas to the Mexican scrublands, the Black Seminoles and Muskogos turned displacement into defiance, preserving a culture that refused to break. Their legacy is a masterclass in grit, teaching us to break both physical bondage and mental slavery. We transform their memory into momentum, using history as a living compass. Fueled by their endurance, we march towards a future of bold justice, dignity, and collective flourishing. History isn't behind us, it's leading us.
I'm Robert Adams. I have a doctorate in anthropology. I'm the executive director here at Penn Center in St. Helena Island, South Carolina. Yeah. In general, I would say that the human spirit hates to be subjugated. And so people find ways to take on, to resist their subjugation, either by slow working, breaking tools, and ultimately running away. So this was an area where people ran away into the swamps of Florida. And these were areas that it was easy to hide out in these places because there's a lot of inaccessible places that the water makes it difficult to get to. So you have to if you want to find somebody, you got to put some effort into it.
No longer able to find freedom in Florida, the Black Seminole haven was effectively closed, driving runaway slaves to seek other routes northwards or to fight for liberty in the ranks of the Union Army during the Civil War.
The other thing about people is oftentimes they have a hard time imagining the opposite of where they are, where they find themselves. You know, change is a very complicated thing for people to imagine and the people to kind of step into.
Look there, Fort Mose. We made it. We finally made it home.
And even earlier, some Black Seminoles had ventured further after the First Seminole War, and a number of those who escaped Jackson's invasions traveled by boat to British Bahamas and found a settlement there on Andros Island, scattered across international borders.
Run, brothers! Freedom waiting! Don't stop now, keep going! The seekers are free.
For every Stono rebellion that we know about, I imagine there's 100 more rebellions that never made the books. Little ones, you know, poisonings, all of these things that never make the books. So I think that, and people looking over their shoulders. But in some of these ways in which, one of the ways in which the system works is it tries to provide incentives for the people that are involved in the system. So it's not just, you know, I remember when
it's not just whipping.
No, because I think, you know,
these groups eventually lost regular contact with one another, yet all of them carry the memory of the Gullah Wars, the story of how their forebears fought, bled, and sacrificed for the principle that no person should ever be a slave. They kept that flame alive, passing it on to their children as a point of pride. Tell me about those that took that chance and how did they remain free and avoid capture?
Well, I think it's all about luck. I mean, I think it's about design and luck. And then the structures emerge to, like, that's the Underground Railroad. That these structures emerge to allow people to live outside of the system, but also to sort of like survive.
The Gullah War did not end on any Florida battlefield. It lives in the hearts of survivors and descendants waiting for history to catch up to freedom. Across centuries, the saga is a testament to Black resistance and self-determination. In the Sea Islands where we are today, the Gullah Geechee culture, language, story, and food fed the earliest resistance. Today, the Gullah Geechee corridor honors that legacy and its contribution to America.
We know about the Underground Railroad. It's a famous thing. There were all these houses and places where people would hide. But before the Underground Railroad, there were always systems and places where people could hide out that were inaccessible or less accessible. And that's how they would survive.
Every gathering to cook rice with okra or greens or to tell an ancestor's tale honors the resilience of the Gullah Wars.
We're all agents of history, no matter.
What does that mean?
We all have agency, and we all, every day that we wake up, we all sort of like do our part to make this system go forward.
Among Black Seminoles, memories endure from Nacimiento to Oklahoma to Georgia, Florida, and the Bahamas. Elders pass down stories of forebearers who broke free and fought for freedom. But back then, enslavers knew who was black and they knew who was white.
No, they didn't.
No?
No.
Tell me.
Well, because again, race itself is a social construct more than it is a physical one. And people move back and forth along those lines when they want to and when they're allowed to, right?
Interesting.
Voices singing strong, echoing.
What made an enslaved person to an enslaver?
I would probably say
proximity to family?
I would say probably the bank. And that person's value as collateral and the ability to borrow money against that person, right? I would say that's probably the biggest factor that you're going to find around, how these people thought about who was who.
These oral histories kept the flame alive when the world forgot. The Gullah link remains unbreakable. In the 1970s, Texas-based Black Seminole descendants still spoke a dialect of Gullah, a thread carried into the present. In Oklahoma, families kept the language and memory alive. Rice, okra, greens, and the ethos of independence and unity.
Because as people would say about when they went to Jefferson's house, and they would say that the people that were serving around the table, the people at the table, looked just like Jefferson, right? So that's why I say we got to rethink all the lines. His relationship with Sally Hemings, all of that, we have to rethink it. Because if we don't rethink it, we're going to get trapped into the trash that we've brought over, right? And it's the trash that keeps us from seeing our linked fate.
The Gullah Wars prepare the broader African-American freedom story. Enslaved people as agents of liberation, defending dignity by force when needed. This beacon inspired generations from Reconstruction to civil rights and beyond. To ask a simple question, how do they escape from here through island hopping? Tell me about that.
Oh, I mean, just through boats, because...
So the boats waiting for them, for the ones that escape from the plantations, how do they head down to Florida?
No, sometimes they just walk down there. Sometimes they use boats because the boats are all around, because this is a maritime culture. This is a place that's defined by its relationship to the water, right? The water was life or death. The water is where you ate from. The water is how you traveled, how you got around.
The Maroons' spirit lives in every Black community that chose freedom over despair. Scholars and descendants are unearthing this hidden history, giving Gullah and Black Seminoles a central place in American liberty. Gullah ancestors were not defeated. They fought, survived, kept their souls intact. The Gullah Wars belong at the center of Black history, alive in language, stories, and the rights won through unity, resistance, and the unwavering faith in freedom.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
No problem.
You got me thinking.
Right.
The word nuance.
Yeah. Even this.
You could, would you paint a picture for us of what it was like on the plantation in your early days?
Everyone was happy. We never heard of all these things that we hear about today. And then it's no disgrace to say they're like children. When we say that, it's because they are like happy children, some of them. Because they like to sit in the sun and rather than work hard. My father had everything thoroughbred, from the pigs, horses, the dogs, and the people had to be thoroughbred.
As far as the colored people were concerned, I feel that they were a good bit happier than they are now. They had less in the way of material things. I can remember back in their 20s, when I was a small boy, they were always singing at their work. They had a great sense of humor. And now today, they just don't seem to care much about that as they used to.
What do you think are the differences between the races?
I think there's a refusal to accept responsibility. I think there's a lack of motivation. They don't worry like the white man. If they have troubles, they go to sleep and wake up the next morning, and that trouble is over.
Is it possible that white people have something to do with the lack of ability for blacks to assimilate into this culture?
Absolutely. But customs die awful hard. It takes a long time. And everyone knew years ago that the Negro would have to be given equality. But in the South, it's been compared to straightening teeth. It takes a slow, steady pressure. You can't do it with a hammer. And white people's attitudes will change in time. I'm a lot more liberal than I was 5 years ago, and I know I'll be a lot more liberal 5 years from now, and I think almost everyone else is in that category.
What has tended to make you more liberal?
Well, realization that the Negro is a human being like anyone else.
Mr. Hasty, what did you think we were before you began to think of us as human beings?
Well, in a way, we thought of you almost as a very superior pet. Something, or rather someone, we had to take care of, because we had to do so much of their thinking for them. We had to do almost everything for them except living their own lives. Anything outside, we had to do for them.